Welcome to the Fighting on Film podcast, the podcast all about classic and obscure war movies, from the Normandy landings to the days of chivalry and swords. If it's been captured on film, we're going to try and cover it. I'm Robbie of RM Military History.
I'm Matthew Moss of Historical Firearms and the Armourer's Bench.
Hello, Robbie here. Did you know you can support the podcast on Patreon? Join the supporting cast today and gain access to exclusive perks, such as discount codes, our monthly Patreon film votes, and the chance to get exclusive merchandise before anyone else. Search Fighting on Film on Patreon or find the link on our website. Thank you. Now back to the show. Welcome back to the pod. Last week we jumped into Bruneval by Wellington with the Red Beret, and this week we zip up our flak jackets and hop in a Huey as we go into Vietnam with Lieutenant Knight for 1988's Platoon Leader. I had to be careful there, Matt, because I nearly set up one of the most revered Vietnam War films of the 80s, but as you know here at FOF, we always like to do it the wrong way around.
Yeah.
So
where else, on what other podcast would you have this follow Red Beret?
Nowhere else.
We're eclectic. You can say absolutely anything about us, but we are eclectic.
From Alan Ladd to Micheal Dudikoff.
To a canon film.
I know. Yeah, it's a special type of movie this week.
Aaron Norris directed canon.
I know. So maybe Matt mentioning Aaron Norris, maybe we should start with production on this one, because I think it's going to be difficult to go into cast without explaining why this film is the way it is.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so production. The film's based on a memoir called Platoon Leader by James R. McDonough, who's a veteran of the Vietnam War. He served in 173rd Airborne. It was released in 1985, and then it was optioned by Canon into this movie. And according to a family member of McDonough's, he said he didn't like the film very much, and he objected to a subplot about him having an affair with the Vietnamese villager. This subplot seems to have been scrubbed or not even made the final cut.
Yeah,
from what no, definitely not. I found that out. Someone on Twitter told me today. From what I've read about the book, the film follows its plot very loosely, and it seems to have been made more to cash in on Platoon in 1986 rather than being a strict adaptation. It was originally called NARM before the name changed to Platoon Leader. It's produced by Breton Film Productions, who produced a few other Canon films, such as River of Death and American Ninja 3. Distributed by the legendary production company that's Canon Films. If you're a B-movie fan, if you're a direct-to-video fan from the 90s, they just make a certain type of movie. And Roger Ebert said this about them in the late 80s. He said, "No other production organisation in the world today, certainly not any of the 7 Hollywood majors, has more chances with serious marginal films than Canon." And then around the same time, they just released the He-Man movie that was quite famously quite an expensive flop. It was meant to be the next Star Wars. They also released Arnie's Raw Deal and so many like beloved B movies. Like at the time, they were doing all the Death Wish sequels. They had Chuck Norris as a contracted star, and they were doing the American Ninja series. As I said, if you're a fan of these sort of the 80s B films, this is it's probably bread and butter to you. As Matt mentioned, top of the show, directed by Aaron Norris, Chuck Norris's brother. As I said, he was a contracted star at Canon, and he was also originally considered for the lead, but they didn't go with Norris. But another double Norris feature.
I wonder what that would have been like.
I know, it'd be interesting, wouldn't it? And this film is the only film of Aaron Norris's career that doesn't have his brother in it.
I read that. That's interesting, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So Aaron Norris's credits obviously include like Missing in Action 3, Delta Force 3, The Hitman. They're all Norris movies. And he also has a small cameo in this as a war correspondent. And there are 4 screenwriters who are involved in the scripting, including British writer Harry Alan Towers, who also penned other Dudikoff vehicles like films of the River of Death and American Ninja 3. So there's a lot of like Canon people do a lot of other Canon stuff. Yeah. They all seem to be.
It's the same with the cast.
Yeah, exactly. The cinematography, though, was done by the late Arthur Wooster, who is an incredibly well thought of camera operator. He worked on many Bond films during his career. Started off doing the Bond movies in 81 with For Your Eyes Only, doing underwater sequences. I think he went on and did 10 more. I think he did his last one he did was GoldenEye, I think.
90s. Yeah.
Um, he also worked as a clapper for the Crown Film Unit in the Second World War, and his
No
other
way.
I
Very
know,
cool.
right? Yeah, and his other cinematography work includes 4 episodes of Sharp in the mid-90s.
Oh.
Return, yeah, I know. Return from the River Kwai, so the war film, and many documentaries. He actually did a 3D film of the Queen's coronation back in the 50s. That was only shown properly in 2009 because the 3D fad died a little bit before they could get it out. And he also did documentaries on Italia 90 and the 1966 World Cup, and he was awarded a BAFTA later on in his career for his services to sort of camera
like
work.
A lifetime award.
Yeah.
Oh wow!
And
nice.
he just brings such a this elevates this film.
I think you're right. Yeah,
people,
I think you're right.
I think people dismiss it out of hand. They see Cannon, they see the sort of Chuck Norris movie-esque,
yeah,
like poster where he's got the big machine gun over his back, and they think, oh, it's like a Rambo missing in action type film. But the camera work does really elevate it. I'm sure we'll talk about it more later on. So the movie's filmed in Durban, South Africa, but then according to our friend Lance Nielsen, who did work for Canon at the time, he said it was shot in the Philippines. So jury's out. It could be both. Who knows?
Maybe. I don't know.
I'm not sure myself. But I couldn't find a solid answer on that. But it was filmed in October 1987 and released in October 88, so about a year's turnaround. Couldn't find the budget, but the box office take was just over 1.3 million US dollars. And the retro review this week comes from the LA Times on the 7th of October 88 by Michael Wilmington. And I'll just read you the first couple of paragraphs. He said, "Return with us now to the thrilling days of yesteryear when blood-drenched macho buddies fought against indifference, heat, jungle rot, short supplies, and vicious Viet Cong, and their own inept, surely multiracial troops to raise the banners of freedom and buddyhood above the hopelessly ungrateful plains of Vietnam. That's a general idea behind Platoon Leader, an in-depth, surely multi-stereotype movie for which audiences may also be hopelessly ungrateful."
A little bit cruel.
Yeah, all the reviews I could find were a little bit...
I feel like our one-word reviews this week are going to agree heavily with that particular classic review.
Pretty much do.
From what I've seen, people don't like this film.
I know. I'd seen this one a while back, and I gave it a reappraisal. So I think I watched it at university. It's like one of those sort of... It was on the telly, I think.
This is one that I watched late one night when I was looking for stuff for the pod, I think.
Yes.
And I saw it, and I think I mentioned it, and then I completely forgot about it. Completely. And then Rob suggested it again last week, and I was like, oh yeah, that sounds good.
I remembered
the scenes with Michael DeLorenzio and the overdose. I remembered that.
Because didn't you watch War Bus as well?
I did watch War Bus as well. Yes.
Type of vein. You were doing a top 5 NAM films that aren't.
I was, and that it quickly spiraled and became like a top 10 unsung
unpublished as yet.
As yet, the research continues, Rob. I am after all a researcher. But yes, sorry.
The one-word reviews. Seri Thomas goes with toilet. Our own historical firearms, Matthew Moss, says shotty. That'll become clear later. Shay598 goes with the tagline wasn't really thought out, was it? Because the tagline is war is hell, this was worse. Champion goes with cheap. AD Bond says nope. Pete Mack goes forgettable. Douglas Gearhart says Cannon-esque. And they'll round it out with Aramis. Because it made me laugh all day. He said pish. So yeah, that was the one-word reviews. Thanks for the support, guys.
I mean, I will put my my hat on the line and say that it's not that bad. It really isn't. There's parts of this film that are even better than Firebase Gloria, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I think you've got a point. We'll talk about it more. We'll try and create a case for this one because I think
let me elucidate everyone on the cast, and then we'll move into a bit more discussion about why we think it isn't as bad as it outwardly appears to be.
Yes.
So as Rob has already mentioned, Micheal Dudikoff is Lieutenant Jeffrey Knight. Dudikoff's had a really interesting career where he has been in a lot of B movies and kind of movies, and as we've already mentioned, American Ninja numerous times. He had a small part in Uncommon Valor, which is obviously a Norris film, a Chuck Norris film. American Ninja in '85, Avenging Force in '86. He played General Lee, which is sort of a cameo part in 1990s Air America with Mel Gibson and Robert Downey Jr. In '95, he was in Soldier Boys, another Vietnam film. In '98, he was in a film called Freedom Strike, great name. And then in
Amazing.
2015, his most recent military film was the outstanding Navy SEALs versus Zombies.
Oh,
yeah,
incredible!
Navy SEALs. Let me see. Let that sink in. Navy SEALs versus Zombies. How good does that sound?
That sounds very October-y podcast release
It,
time.
it
Maybe
does
we'll
it,
have to
doesn't
do
it?
that.
That sounds very 2015.
It does. Yeah. He's one of those actors. Like Canon were pushing him, weren't they? Like they really thought they were pushing him to be big, and it sort of didn't happen. But then he's really cult as well. So
that's very true. Very true.
I think he's good in this. I don't think you can fault him in this, really.
Not really. No, I think he probably provides a better performance than Chuck Norris would have. Because as soon as you put that on and you sit down to watch that film, and Chuck Norris is Lieutenant Jeffrey Knight, then you're just watching Chuck Norris be
it's a completely different film.
Platoon leader, and that's it. But with Dudikoff, for me, Dudikoff is a relative unknown. I haven't watched a great many of his films, so I don't.
In a couple.
Yeah, I have too, but I'm not. I don't see Micheal Dudikoff when I watch the film.
No, I have more experience of watching the Red Letter Media guys watching Micheal Dudikoff films.
That's true. Yes. Yeah. That's called cultural osmosis.
Yes, I think you're right.
So just to talk about some of the other cast, there's some interesting characters in here. We've got Robert F. Lyons, who plays Sergeant Michael McNamara. He was in a lot of TV, and I'm going to repeat that a lot in this rundown of the cast because a lot of these guys.
McNamara is a great name for a Vietnam character because he's the
NCO name for a Vietnam
American Defense Secretary's name at the time. Brilliant.
He was in Death Wish 2. He was in Command 5 in 1985. And he was also in American Eagle in 1989. And as I said, a lot of TV.
Yes.
Then we have Michael DeLorenzio, who played Private Raymond Becerra, who was a principal dancer in Fame. He was also one of the dancers in Michael Jackson's Thriller. And he was in, I believe, the video for Lionel Richie's Dancing on the Ceiling.
Wow.
And then he was also, Rob, you like this because you've just started watching it. 2 episodes of Miami Vice.
Yes. Yeah. I looked it up as well. I was like, oh, looking forward to seeing him.
Because he's pretty good in it.
Yeah.
He also played Paco in an episode of 1988's The Dirty Dozen series, and we stopped Dirty Dozen December dead after the films, and much to my disappointment, Rob wouldn't let us do the Dirty Dozen TV series.
Well, because as hard as it is to see the original, the quadrilogy of Dirty Dozen movies, which it sounds crazy to say. Brand new sentence alert, everyone. So as weird as that sounds, it's harder to watch that series. You can watch the pilot, but getting through the series it's going to be difficult because it was famously not very well received.
Well, it's okay. It's okay because Dirty Dozen December 2, when we do the whole series, will be late. It'll be amazing.
Harder.
Anyway, he was in A Few Good Men in 1992, and again, a lot of TV work as well in between then and now. Jesse Dabson plays Private Joshua Parker. He was in Death Wish 4, and again, a lot of TV work, far too much for me to mention. Rick Fitz plays Sergeant Robert Hayes, and he is criminally underused in this film because he's introduced and then you very rarely see him for the rest of the film.
Right.
He's the other sergeant. So you've got McNamara, you've got Roach, and then you've got Rick Fitz playing Sergeant Hayes.
Oh, God, I didn't even realise there were 3 sergeants.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, God. Only because Roach and McNamara. So
they're big characters, aren't they?
They are big characters, yeah.
Fitz was in, again, a lot of TV.
Yes.
A-Team, he was in Hanoi Hilton in 87, the year before. And he also voiced Mr. Johansson in Hey Arnold for quite a while.
Wow.
Yeah. First Hey Arnold mention in the pod, by the way. Tony Pierce plays Private Jan Schultz, who appeared in POW Escape 1986, which I believe is another Vietnam film. He had a small role in Dances with
That's
Wolves.
a Carradine movie. Sorry, you just dropped my memory.
I think it is. Yeah, it is. For The Boys in 1991, another Vietnam film, I think. No, I think that's a World War II film, actually, with Bette Midler.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's like a USO type thing.
Yeah.
Can you imagine Bette Midler in a Cannon film? That'd be amazing.
Oh, that'd be incredible. I'll get you for this, Midler. Simpsons references.
Oh my god. Brian Libby as Sergeant Roach, who is peak in this.
It's good.
That should have been the trailer tagline. Lots and lots of TV. A-Team, Dallas, Aftermash, The Father Dowling Mysteries. He was Captain Jackson in Heat, Michael Mann's Heat. He was Floyd.
What, the TV one or the actual movie?
No, the actual one. So not the like TV movie Michael Mann made first, but
not the one actual... it grew out of.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
He was Floyd in Shawshank Redemption, and he was a mechanic in Air Force One with Harrison Ford. And
he's a cold motherfucker in this.
He really is. And finally, he was Sheriff McGee in The Green Mile. So
wow, what career!
He kind of had like an upward trajectory at the end of his career. To me, well, I think he's still acting, so it's not undercut him too much. But he's great in this.
Please come on the show and talk to us about this movie if you're out there.
Yes, please do, Brian.
Please.
Michael Ryder as Private Don Pike. Again, TV work, A-Team, Knight Rider, TJ Hooker. And then finally, to round out our cast, we've got William Smith, who plays Major Flynn. Very recognizable face, lots and lots and lots of TV work from the 60s onwards. Small film roles, everything from Batman to Lassie to the A-Team to the Twilight Zone. And in 1963 and 64, 2 episodes of Combat.
Yes.
Always nice to get a Combat.
I love the Combat links.
And in terms of films, he was in Never So Few with Sinatra and McQueen. I don't know how, but in 1959 he was. Yeah. Hell Comes to Frogtown with Roddy Piper in 1988. You showed me the trailer for that. That trailer is insane. That's not even a military movie, but it has to be mentioned. That film looks mental. Hell on the Battleground in 88, which is another Vietnam film. And then he's probably best known for playing Strelnikov in Red Dawn. Yes. And this is 1984 magnum opus, Red Dawn.
Yes, can't wait to do that one.
Mm-hmm.
No, he's great in this. I thought he was the guy who played Bennett in Commando.
He does have a bit of a look with that mustache, doesn't he?
Yeah. But no, he's not. But he was great in this. The cast is...
It's good.
He's good. So what they've got to do, solid cast, yeah.
There's some ropey line deliveries, yes.
Yeah, there is, but then I think the script, and unless it's McNamara or Dudikoff, sorry, not McNamara or Knight talking, I don't really think a lot of them are given much to do.
No,
no. Yeah.
Rick Fitz obviously isn't.
No, God, I
didn't even know.
Forgot. Yeah. I know. I was so enthralled by Roach just being a proper... He's definitely done like 3 tours. He's just, I don't know, he's just...
Proper psychopath NCO.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect.
He looks like the guy that Don McCullum took a photo of in the 1,000-Yard Stare. That's like kind of what I think he's like based off of.
Well, speaking of Roach, I think we should probably talk about his weapon of choice in this week's Alley Tally.
It's time for Alley Tally on Fighting on Film.
So, before we start Alley Tally, I was trying to work out the year of this movie because it never explicitly says in the film what era of Vietnam they're in.
Yeah.
Vietnam War they're in. So the book is based in 71.
Okay, interesting.
So I'm going to go with 71. But I think it just seems a lot more just general Vietnam type.
Yeah.
So it could be any time from like 68 to 73.
Yes, it could be.
It doesn't ever say.
It's late war, I would say.
Especially how the replacements are treated like they're very beatnik
and
kind of guys.
Everything's quite lax, and the draft is mentioned. There's a bit where Dudikoff meets some replacements, and there's an FNG where he goes, and what's your problem, soldier? You're just unhappy to be drafted or something like that. And turns out he decided to join up to avoid some heat back home.
That's it. I'm the greaser.
Mm-hmm.
They call me the greaser. Yeah.
There's a very funny scene with Roach where they're doing some mine clearance.
Oh, that's good. He just goes off for a piss.
Yeah, he leaves him with his finger on the mine.
Yeah. Then he takes the detonator out and it's like, good, next time you do it on your own.
Yeah.
It's cold. It's just such a cold,
it's great scene.
Methodical dude. But no, I think it's probably early 70s, very late 60s. Which is rare for Nam films. You don't usually get them that late in the war.
Yeah, I mean I would say probably 70 maybe, but yeah. There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, there's a load. It's a decent representation of Vietnam era American troops. From what I can imagine, was a very small budget. There's third pattern fatigues. There's a good mix of M56 webbing and the later Alice type webbing. It's more sort of plasticky looking. To sort of describe it for the non-experts out there. They're wearing M1959 style flak jackets, which don't have the fat collar that you see on 69 jackets. Kind of annoys me they wear them out on patrol still, because that's a big trope. I mean, see footage and pictures. People might wear them on a firebase. They might wear them if they're going somewhere, but out on patrol, they're very heavy. They make you sweat. You know, you can't, your body can't breathe properly in them. They're not very comfortable. So lads did ditch them. But, you know, it's a Vietnam B movie. It's tropey. It's fine. Then there's 2 Huey helicopters on show, and then what I think is a Hughes Loach helicopter, little sort of thing that comes in after and does a few rockets
right.
in there, which is rare. You don't see much of them. So I assume the South Africans had them if it was shot in South Africa, or the Philippines had them if it was shot in the Philippines. And then there are some 20-round magazines on the show, which you don't usually see.
Yeah,
couple every now and then. 30-round mags as well for the M16s. And I'll talk more about my weapon of choice this week after Matt has a turn, because I could be here forever.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, then there's a lot of 30-rounders, and that is a classic B movie, Vietnam War movie trope where they all have the 30-rounders, and I mean, it's true of some of the big ones too, isn't it? But
yeah, it's not completely wrong, but it's not right either.
Just when, and this given it. You know, it being late war, we think it's a little bit more forgivable, but there weren't that many. Yeah. There weren't that many around.
And even then, it doesn't really. I only mention it a lot on the show because it's just something to talk about. But it doesn't really bother me that much, really.
No, it's very minor.
It is what it is. Yeah,
that's very rivet country. If we start being like, nope, 30-round mags, that's wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Like, no, I'm not bothered. No, I'm not bothered. Yeah. You know,
so those 30-round mags are being used in a mix of Colt SB1s, which are the semi-automatic sporter version of the M16, and some M16A1s. Sergeant McNamara has a really cool little like Colt sporter, doesn't he?
Which I've written a big thing about that.
I'll let you handle that one then, Rob.
Sorry.
I will move on to what is my favorite, and that is Sergeant Roach's Winchester 1300 shotgun, which is we both got very excited about this, because not only does he run the hell out of it in this film, he is running and gunning with it, but he has what we both agree is the ice coldest shotgun reload of any film. And I'm including John Wick in this, where he's Keanu Reeves is trained to shit to reload shotguns. But this dude, Roach, in this film with that shotgun reload is impeccable, and it's such a cold scene as well.
Yeah, I've made a gif of it already. We'll share it on the Twitter and Facebook.
Rob was he's made a gif.
Yeah, but it's just it's very like cowboy-esque the way he uses that shotgun.
It's so good. It's almost as good as the shotgun use in Wind of the Lion.
Yes. Yeah, very. But he's like slam firing it. He's like treating it like it's automatic. It's great. It's just cool, isn't it?
There's a battle sequence where they push through and they make the VC fall back. And there's some Viet Cong coming up the hill. And I think Dudikoff looks to McNamara and says, "Don't worry, they're headed towards Roach." So he's like,
Yeah.
Roach is the one-man blocking force with this Winchester shotgun. And he very coldly is stood behind a tree with the shotgun, waiting, and he hears them coming, sees them coming. Takes like a half-step, quarter turn, ices 2 of them as they're coming up the hill, and then very, very slickly reloads. And just as the guy turns the corner, shoots him point blank. And it's the most canon movies, like blast death ever. But it's just ice.
But it's how he's holding the shell, and he slides it up, and then as he slides it up, he pulls up the handle, so he loads it as he puts it in, and he just blasts the dude. It's something out of a western. I think that's why I like it so much.
I don't know many westerns that are that cold.
Like The Professionals, maybe, or something.
Maybe, yeah. Lee Marvin on a trench gun, that's something else.
Yeah, his characters is interesting because you do hear every now and then of guys who, did a couple of tours, maybe too many, and volunteered to go back, and they were just war happy type people. Like I've read some reports of people like that, and definitely read memoirs of people who talk about people like that. So for him to just be playing this sort of killing machine, cold, methodical, robot-esque type fighter, it is very interesting. But his shotgun, the Winchester 1300, it is a US Army one that was in use at that time. So that's a nice little thing for me. It's not like a post-war shotgun. It's just nice to have it like that. And that's his main weapon. He doesn't use anything else.
I think we've seen with an M16 very briefly in the base defense sequence.
He uses McNamara's little carbine thing later on.
I think so. Yeah. And then before you go into your 2 favorites that you've mentioned,
sure thing.
Just to round it out, there's an M72 law which they use to defend the village. I'm doing air quotes. Defend the village. They literally blow up someone's house with it. And the whole point, the whole mission of the platoon is to defend this village. And they do a bang up job of it.
Job,
and hence sarcasm. There's what looks like a mocked up M79 blooper, because there's a number of features on it that are slightly different that don't.
I'm not sure what that was. I couldn't work it out.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I tried to dig in. It's something similar. It might be like a flare launcher made to look, but they overdub it at one point with a rocket launcher noise. It goes like, poof.
Yes. That's just for viewers' benefit, isn't it? It's what we just think. Ordnance.
Some nice claymore use, and then there's a great scene where they drop a metric buck ton of M29. I think it's M29 grenades down on a group of BC from the top of a waterfall. That's shot
really well.
It's isn't it?
It's Wooster's camera work. That could be a scene from like Lost the Mohicans. The way it's done, like it's so poetic. Like they're all quiet and they've got the VC are bathing down in this little sort of brook where the waterfall's going down, and McNamara's like motioning to be quiet but motioning them to get a grenade out, and they all throw a grenade over the lip of the waterfall, and it's done in like slow motion with like fast cuts.
Overkill, but it's great.
It's overkill in the edit, but it really gives it something. It's like how I keep thinking that the camera work in this movie just elevates what in other films would just be this excuse to blow up a load of the enemy and it'd be bombastic. But it's the way that it's done in this movie where it gets away with it.
It's really nicely shot.
Yeah.
M26 grenade. I think I said M20.
Okay.
I meant M26. Just to be correct.
It's fine. Yeah.
Anyway, Rob, you have a couple of favourites that you want to mention.
That's fine. Yeah. So the film continues what is the XM-alike trope, where, so if you've listened to episodes before, we've done Vietnam films. I think I explained in that, maybe the Hamburger Hill episode.
I think it might have been, yeah.
Or maybe
was it Firebase Glory, maybe?
Might have been Firebase Glory. No, it was the Charlie Mopic episode.
God, we've done a fair few Vietnam films.
We have, and we've done a few Vietnam films that no one fucking watches, right? But that's why we do this show.
It is.
So every time we see one of these movies, someone has, a grizzled sergeant, as McNamara is, or an NCO what I'm calling an XM-alike. So the XM, just quickly, the XM177 E1/E2 series of carbines were basically an early version of what now we would say was an M4 carbine. Very early carbine.
The first shortened version of the M16. Yeah,
that's it. So here, McNamara has a Colt Sporter 2, which you see a lot of. They're in Tropic Thunder as XM stand-ins. They're in Platoon as XM stand-ins. But his one's interesting because it has, the McNamara, is interesting because he has a more traditional M16 solid buttstock, which the regular M16s have. And then he has the handguard, the smaller handguard and barrel, but he has not the extended flash hider that you'd have on the XM. He has the birdcage style M16 flash hider. So you might think, oh, that looks really weird and wrong. Well, no, it doesn't, because in country, armourers would get kits to turn M16s into XMs, because not every XM coming off the production line made it to country. Some were used by the American Air Force, some were used by, the MAC-V mainly had them, and they made their way into general service later. So if you see pictures of them out in country, you see these weird Franken guns where you've got, a small flash hider, a big stock, or someone might have even improvised a foregrip on there like we have now. So I really like that. It's a nice little personalised weapon for him to use. He's an NCO. He can get away with it. That time of the war, anything's possible as well. So I kind of like his Franken XM. Really think it's cool. And he also has a Smith & Wesson Model 29 in a really cool leather shoulder holster, which
gets used.
And it gets used at the end when he gets hurt. He's downed on the floor. He's been hit by I think he gets hit by a small arms round, and then he gets blown up by a mine or something.
I think it's a mortar lands.
That's it. And he pulls the revolver in a sort of last act of defense, of defending himself, and he's taking out lads and he's shooting it everywhere because he can't see. It's a lovely little scene. But I love McNamara. The film could be about him because he sells that character so much.
It's really good. It's really well acted as well. It really lifts the film. I think those 3-4 performances around the main cast really do elevate the film above what it could have ended up being.
Yeah, I think you're right. The plot is very...
It's A to B, isn't it?
It's A to B, but it's everything you've seen in NAM movies up to that point. You get on a patrol, you get ambushed.
Yeah.
You get a night attack.
We'll talk more about this in a moment, I think.
Yeah.
And of course, there's one last thing we need to mention, which is Lieutenant Knight's Browning high power, which is an interesting inclusion. We first see it on the desk in his dugout, and then later on he threatens Michael De Lorenzio's character with it after he almost frags him. And he basically puts it against his forehead and says, "Do that again, and I will."
It's like you better put one in my back, or because if you
put
don't,
a score in my back. Yeah, that's it.
Really threatens him.
But you had a bit of headcanon for that, didn't you?
Yeah, so I'm thinking, how is this American officer got a traditionally more Commonwealth used pistol?
Absolutely.
And it's not out of the realm's possibility for him to have one anyway. But I was thinking, and I know we always do this with movies we had in headcanon, and we're like, oh, how would this happen? We do it every now and then just to appease ourselves when we're doing the alley tally. We've got to make it work. I think he got it off of an Australian when he was on R&R. He must have bought it at a PX or something. Some Aussies going, I'll see this pistol, mate, for $30 or something. And Dudikoff's like, yeah, fine, I like that gun, and he gives him like $30 or whatever.
Well,
that might be a horrific price. But I mean, it's still chambered in the same round that a Colt takes, so he could swap out the ammo.
It's in 9mm, so the Colt's in 45, isn't it?
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Colt's in 45 ACP, and
he's gonna have a procurement nightmare when he's out.
He is. Let's hope he bought a box of bullets, as they say.
Be running around Hawaii trying to find Australians on R&R.
Let's hope he runs across someone with a suppressed Stelling submachine gun to give him some.
That would have been weird if he'd had one of them.
Just to switch things up a little bit before we move on to favourite scenes, I think this week I'm going to introduce a new segment called the Trope Tally. When we were watching this, and I was watching it, I was texting Rob, and I listed a load of tropes off. This isn't to say that the tropes aren't authentic and shouldn't be in here. It's just just a running tally of tropes that I spotted. And I know you spotted a few as well. So feel free to jump in anytime with any you spotted, Rob.
Okay.
Trope number 1, military trumpet theme music.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not a bad theme. It's not a bad theme at all.
Okay.
Trope number 2.
Trope 2, remote firebase in the middle of fucking nowhere.
Poorly positioned, absolutely.
Poorly positioned, yeah.
Trope number 3 for me is introducing the main character in the chopper.
Yeah, I love that though. That's like it was like the Outpost that we did.
It's great. No, it's a good way of doing it. It is. It's fine.
Oh, hang on.
4?
Yeah.
I think we're on 4.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, trope 4. Trope 4, it riffing off every successful Vietnam movie up to that point. So you have like a scene where he's like introducing the main characters, like in Hamburger Hill, where you get that bit where they're on the firebase being talked to. Trope 5, smoking marijuana.
Oh, good. I've got that. That was my next one. Smoking weed on watch. Absolutely.
Yeah. Wouldn't have fucking happened. I doubt that would have happened. I've done a lot of sort of.
Would have been a very lax unit, I would imagine.
Yeah, I've done a lot of research into it, and from what I can tell, I mean, most things that you read, there was no. We did it when we were on like R&R, or if we were on a fire base and we were like chilling out and we weren't on watch or we weren't on thing. But no one ever says we did it when we were on patrol or when we were on on stag or whatever. But they still did care about their buddies.
I mean, what's self-preservation?
What the Nam film does is it blurs the history a lot, which I think is a bit unfair sometimes.
Next, I've got religious squaddy gets upset about victims of the war.
Yeah, that's a bit of a trope. Yeah,
it's a bit of a trope, but it's not a bad trope.
Not a bad trope, no.
Trope number, whatever number we're up to, mines. Classic war movie mine scene.
Yeah, mine scene. Yeah, very true. Very true. Vietnam War movie trope. I think we're on 8 or 9. But randomly burning things.
Oh yeah, that field.
just burn the fucking. They only burn the field so they can get a lovely shot of them walking down the hill with the fire behind them. That's why they get it.
That's probably true. It's true.
It's Wooster just being on set like that. That looked fucking cool. You burn that for me, please.
There's a sequence where I think it's Roach stands up mid firefight at the base defense after an RPG hits the watchtower. And there's a big explosion which frames him, which looks great. And that is that's definitely a trope. One of the sergeants says, "Oh no, it's McNamara." He says, "I don't know, I don't like it."
That's a good trope.
Classic. Yeah.
Oh, another one
before he gets badly wounded.
My last one would be: no one aims their M16s very often. They all fire from the hip. But that's not really a trope, because if you do some research into the Vietnam War, there's a crazy amount of rounds fired per kill or per. I read things. People go, look, we just aimed at bushes and aimed at movement and things. We just would fire off a whole mag and then reload and fire again. You're giving scared young men a full automatic weapon, and they're going to try and defend themselves. Insane amount of rounds being fired in firefights for very little return kill wise.
Yeah, off the back of that, one-arming an M60.
Yes.
That's a trope. And then
finally, that M60 doesn't fire at times. It's just him moving around with it, and the machine gun noise is going off. The belt's not moving and all that. It's great.
And finally, I've got shell-shocked dude standing in the middle of a barrage telling everyone to leave him alone.
Yes. Yes, that's right near the end, isn't it? As you were saying, about the tropes not being bad, most Vietnam War movies have these tropes in them because at some point they're based on something. Every war movie has tropes in it. Every crime film has tropes in it. It's how you use and deal with the tropes.
Yes.
Is the interesting thing. There's a thing I'll talk about in a minute, but there is a couple of things this movie does what you don't see in many Vietnam War movies, but I'll talk about it later.
Talk about those. I was just going to caveat off that and mention that there's an interesting review on actual IMDb, which was left by a retired lieutenant colonel of the 503rd, who did a tour in 1969. And of course, it might not be a legitimate one, but it reads kind of legitimate, and he gives his name and his actual dates of tour. And it's just interesting. And of course, also to caveat this, the experiences vary. He says, if you want to see the Vietnam War as it was experienced by a real platoon leader, this is it. Authentic down to the mannerisms, slang, terror, and delusion of it all. This film has none of the weird fantasisms of Apocalypse Now or the left-wing political hype of Platoon.
Interesting.
Very interesting. I mean,
it doesn't concern itself with a lot of
no, it doesn't.
socio-political issues. It might have a line, but it didn't do anything else. Even down to the briefing scene that you get at the start is one line, like literally.
Defend the village.
We're sending you here. Go there. It's very succinct. But then I guess there were times when, new lieutenants or replacement and COs were just told, right, there's a firebase there. You got to go and that's your job.
Yeah.
There's literally episodes of Tour of Duty where that is the plot of that episode, where there's a firebase. The main cast go in and it's there. I think that's an episode like 3 or 4. It's their job just to take over this firebase. And this felt like a long episode of Tour of Duty.
Yeah, you did say this. You did say this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Not in a bad way though. Not in a bad way.
Well, I think that takes us into favorite scenes.
It does. So for me, my favourite scene, and it's quite a short scene, and there's loads of little, almost vignette type scenes in this where they're just going through every Vietnam trope, as we mentioned. But I really like the night attack on the LZ because you're waiting for it because they set it up early on where they're like,
oh yeah. God, I forgot a trope, Rob. Defense preparation montage.
Yes, you could almost put like a sort of
the
80s theme, something over that, like building a bridge to your heart or something like maybe like a classic montage song. But no, you're right, and they do set it up. They're saying, oh, this is the only village that the VC don't control. There's a pro-Western village, and you're right on the edge of where we can operate from, and blah blah. You're the last position. Line.
Yeah,
very tenuous. Yeah, even like McNamara says at the start, they're saying you should point your M60s over there and over there, but no, you have to point them this way because I've fucking been here. It's really like
aim them directly at the village.
Proper like
that's where they're going to come from.
Bloodthirsty. He knows what he's doing. But then you finally get to this night attack, and it's after Knight has requested more help from the Major. The Major's like, I'll do my damnedest for you, in classic B-movie sort of war movie trope style. And then you get this night attack by the VC, and it's at night, obviously, because it's a night attack. So fucking stupid. Leave that in. I meant to say it's really dark, right? But the way that it's lit is really nice. You've got like red lights, you've got some very like yellowish light, and it's just the scale of it. It's again where Wooster's camera work comes in. You feel like they could be overwhelmed.
Bigger than you expect, doesn't it?
Yeah, much bigger. And you've got 50 cals going off. You've got flares, illumination flares popped up. The VC come in with rocket launchers and they start hitting the emplacements. Yeah, a guy sets off a claymore.
Yeah.
And then once they've called in the choppers and they get an napalm strike, there's a beautiful, and it's a blink and you'll miss it, piece of framing, but I absolutely love it, where there's flames going off in the background and it's like almost to the side of the base, and you see a stream of VC coming over the edge of this ridge line, or like the entrance to the jungle. Yeah. And all the guys are like, yo, get them, and they will like turn and start firing. But it looks like there could be a sea of VC out there. Yeah. I really like it. Yeah. It's what Firebase Gloria didn't do, or it didn't have it contained.
Gloria had scale on its side, but they didn't have the cinematography, I don't think. I think the base defense sequence in Firebase Gloria is really good and one of my favorite parts of the film because there's a lot of dynamic movement and
I like it in a schlocky way though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this has a little bit of style to it. And also you're not expecting that really impressive gun run by the Hueys because Firebase Gloria is kind of hampered in that they have unarmed Hueys doing a similar sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it's just pyro on the ground. But with this, you're seeing the rockets firing out the rocket pods and stuff, and that's really cool.
Yeah, there's loads going on. And there's a nice shot from like the side of a Huey where you see like a minigun going off. Very blink and you'll miss it. But it's just a very tight little sequence. I thought that was going to be the end of the movie.
I did too, actually.
And it doesn't, but it's a nice little midpoint, like little sequence. So it's quite strong. The thing is, it's one of those things, because I've said don't dismiss the movie out of turn. Wait until you get to this part. I know there's going to be people that just won't get this far. Yeah. And I think you're doing the film with this service if you don't let it develop a little bit. But no, Matt, what's your favourite scene?
I've got a few, and it's one of those films where it's not a favourite scene, it's a favourite moments. And as you said, it's kind of vignette-y in places. There's a nice sequence early on-ish where they do like there's a jungle night sequence where they use red light torch, which you never see in a film. You never see in films. No, exactly. You never really see a great deal of red light torch use, where they find like a booby trap. And there's some genuine tension created a little bit later on where they set up an ambush to hopefully catch like a small infiltration team. And it turns out there's an entire like North Vietnamese company just plows through this opening, this clearing. And
that's a greatly shot sequence.
It really is. It's very effective. And they just hunker down, hope they aren't seen. Yeah. McNamara's there with his finger in the pin of a grenade, ready to go. And
I tell you what, that sequence, if it was US Marines in the Pacific with Japanese troops running through it, you could slot that right into Thin Red Line. That's what the camera work reminds me of. Yeah.
Good point. Although some of my other favorite moments we've already talked about. We've talked about Roach with his shotgun, and we've also talked about that scene with Greaser, the new
that's funny.
New replacement rather, with Roth, with Roach, that works really well. My other favorite is where Aaron Norris appears as a press photographer or like a reporter.
I thought it was Willem Dafoe for a minute, because he looks a little bit like Willem Dafoe.
I was sat there watching it, and I thought that beard looks very much like Chuck Norris's beard, because it's a very full beard. It's a Norris beard. I was like, that's got to be
that's
got to be a cameo. It's got to be a cameo.
Yeah,
and it was, and it's a pretty decent cameo. Yeah. And he deserves it. He deserves to have a little cameo.
He's having his Coppola. He's having his Coppola one, where it's like, keep moving like you're fighting, but it's not quite as jarring as that, because I always find that cameo in Apocalypse Now to be too jarring, because it doesn't seem natural. Whereas nothing in that movie seems natural because it's a fucking fever dream. But you know what I mean. Like, it's a strong cameo. As cameos go.
Well, yeah.
It would be funny if it had been Chuck and Norris. Chuck and Aaron.
Oh, Chuck as his cameraman. That would have been hilarious.
That would have been funny. Yeah.
Well, yeah. That as you say, the base defense is one of my favorite scenes, because I just wasn't expecting it to be quite as well choreographed and shot as it was.
Yes.
And as you also mentioned, that isn't the end of the film. So there's an operation where they're supposed to be protecting the village and kind of using it as bait to destroy a larger MVA force, and things go wrong a little bit. McNamara's wounded, and they end up in the wrong position, so they have to retake the village. During which there's a lot of carnage, which is also rather good. And I think we'll probably mention this in a moment, but it depicts the VC killing Vietnamese civilians, which isn't something you always see. And that's another thing that this film shares with Firebase Gloria as well.
Yeah,
it shows
very
North Vietnamese war crimes.
Yeah, because that's a whole part of the war that really, obviously it's there, but it doesn't get reported as much as US war crimes. Obviously, we know to a big extent that the US committed horrible atrocities almost probably daily, weekly, sometimes without even realizing it as well, because it was all about body count and the way that they were geared up out there. At times, it was like, well, how you're meant to follow these orders without doing heinous things, because if you don't, you might not get a promotion, you might not get your base a certain thing you want. It was all very like carrot and stick sometimes out there, would feel to my knowledge. But there's a great book about the Australians in Vietnam that I read, and there was a lot about Vietnamese war crimes in there that I hadn't heard about from other American memoirs or histories. So for this film to show VC troops blowing up villages and burning huts and killing civilians offhand, much like they do in Platoon, in a very similar sequence, was surprising to me. I respect the film for showing that, because not many films do, and not many people are aware that the VC were just as ruthless and cold-blooded at times, even more so in certain areas and times during the war. So that's an interesting part of the movie for me, and I respect it for that, because it's not what I expected from a Cannon film.
Element.
It's very. I must admit, I'm building it up, but it's a very, very small part of the movie. It's maybe 2 minutes long, 2 minute sequence.
It's noteworthy that they included it in there. But, yeah, that takes us into final thoughts, I think.
Hello, I'm Al Murray, and you're listening to Fighting on Film, the world's #1 war film podcast.
I enjoyed this one I like how Cannon films are very over the top type way. Sometimes this is a type of movie that you want to watch. As we said, it's very cliche heavy, but I think it deals with its cliches quite well. I think, as I said, I think some slate the movie too early. They don't give it a chance. Like, if you can get over the 20-minute mark and then start to see some of these really nice camera work, quite nice staging of sequences, I think you can enjoy it. The best Micheal Dudikoff film that I've seen. I think he's doing stellar work. And dare I say, I actually enjoy it more than Firebase Gloria, which is a very similar film.
That's interesting.
And as well, it's exactly the type of film that Tropic Thunder was lampooning at the start.
Yes.
It's exactly that kind of. So if you want to see what maybe a whole Tropic Thunder would have been like if they just stuck to the war part of it, it's this. I really do think it. And as I say, you can't watch AAA movies every week. And this has its place in the genre. And I think it is worth your time. And it's out on YouTube to watch. There's so many rips of it on YouTube. I mean, you can't not find it.
That is true. There are quite a few. I would agree. I was surprised. I was pleasantly surprised by it being better than I thought it would be. It's probably the best Aaron Norris film I've seen.
Without doubt. Yeah. I'm not a huge Chuck Norris fan, I must admit. So
no, I'm not either. But I mean, we will get round to some of his war movie-based stuff because it is interesting. It has merit to discuss.
USA.
Yeah, that's going to be mental. I would say that there are some ropey bits in here. There's some delivery of lines that aren't great, and I know we've given it a fair crack of the whip, and we've said it is pretty good. But there's a couple of howlers that I've got to mention. There's a little bit where Dudikoff is injured by a mine, and he literally just goes, "Oh, I'm on fire!"
Yeah, that's a bit weird. Yeah,
ow. It's not the best performance of someone.
It's a bit hammy.
Alluded.
It's very hammy.
It's a little bit hammy, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's a bit where the radio man goes for an Oscar when he's wounded.
But that's why I likened it to Tropic Thunder, because it's absolutely, like that.
Totally. And the medic sort of comes over and presides over him and he goes, Lieutenant, this man's dead. And it's the straightest delivery.
I like how straight that medic is. And I'll tell you what, that medic has a really good death sequence.
He has a very gnarly death, yeah.
Where he goes to protect a Vietnamese woman and her baby that are running through the firefight. And when he gets hit by the rounds, I don't think I've seen an actor act being shot as well as he does.
It's pretty good. And
he gets hit through the shoulder, and it's like he really throws himself back, but then he saves the baby. So it's a bit of a cliche death, but it's good.
A little bit. It's another one of the tropes.
It's like classic. Another trope. Flak jackets being fucking useless as well. I mean, because they weren't meant for taking rounds. That's not the point.
No, exactly. I mean, there's a fair bit of mortar fire in this, so they probably helped with that.
Like in The Simpsons, the goggles, they do nothing. The flak jackets, they do nothing.
I think to sum it up for me, I'd say it's surprisingly well shot and directed. There's some decent performances. I've seen far worse war movies. I've seen far worse Vietnam War movies.
We've sat through Rebels of PT 128, so anything is possible.
Yes, we have. This doesn't. I mean, to be fair, this doesn't have the best bulkhead scene of any war movie I've ever seen, like PT 128 does.
No.
For a modest budget, it does some interesting things. It shows a couple of interesting relationships between the 3 or 4 main characters. I think the way it handles the heroin overdose from Michael De Lorenzio's character is I don't know whether there's
he gets threatened by Dudikoff for fragging him. In the next scene, he's OD'd on heroin. I'm like, did he scare you that much that you wanted to get out? Like,
I don't know whether that was lifted from somewhere else or it was in the book.
I don't get what that was about.
I don't know. Surely you wouldn't just let him go off on his own anyway. But anyway. But as we've said, it hits a lot of the classic tropes, but sometimes more meaningfully than a lot of other films do.
Yeah.
So I would say, booking the retro reviews, I'd say it's probably, it's worth your time. Yeah.
I said to me and my wife watched it together, and I said, obviously we grew up in the 90s, but I was like, if I had my £3 or my £4 in the early 90s, late 80s, and I went to the rental shop and I saw this and I wanted that type of movie, I'd be happy with this.
I probably would have pulled this out of the bargain bin at MVC for £1.
Definitely. Yeah. Which is ironic now because it's really fucking hard to get on Blu-ray or DVD. It's easier to get a VHS copy of this than it is a Blu-ray release. Because these Canon films just seem to be. There's another one I've pitched to Matt that we're going to do later on in the year, called Mercenary Fighters. Guess when we might be doing that? Month 2 coming soon. But it's like that. That's hard to find that movie. We found a copy to watch, but yeah, if it's out there, and I think this is one of those films. Like just give it another chance. Just maybe view it with different lenses. It's worth your time.
Until I've watched all of Aaron Norris's films, I'm going to call this his magnum opus.
I agree. Yes. Milius has Red Dawn. Norris has Platoon Leader.
I think that rounds us out nicely. So thanks for listening, everybody. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, at Fighting on Film. You can find our entire back catalogue over at www.fightingonfilm.com. Who knows, you might have a FOF binge and catch up with any that you've missed. We have a brand new search function, which allows you to find all the ones that previously apparently we couldn't find. So yeah, thanks for listening.
It's good. Catch you next week. Catch you next week, guys. Bye.
Bye, guys.